Power supplies for outdoor applications must be able to handle the elements. They are subject to bitter cold, extreme heat, blowing dust, water, and vibration. If they fail, you could have a very difficult and costly repair to deal with. On today's Tech Chat, we will learn how to select the right power supply for your outdoor applications so you can stay inside, cozy, and confident that your power supply is up to the challenges. Welcome to Tech Chat, sponsored by Mouser Electronics, where we chat with experts about the latest technical innovations in the electrical engineering industry. Today we are joined by Brian Liu, an electrical engineer in the Technical Service Department of Meanwell. Brian, welcome to Tech Chat.
Hey, Dale, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Brian. So Meanwell is one of the world's leading power supply manufacturers, and they are one of a very few that are dedicated to standard power supply products. So who better to teach us about power supplies for outdoor applications than an EE from Meanwell? So with that, Brian, why don't you introduce your topic for today?
Okay, so today I would like to introduce power supply that more suitable for outdoor application because unlike indoor, for outdoor application, we have to deal with moisture, debris, rain, water, UV, and also some application may have vibration that may cause the power supply to fail. So Meanwell developed in the last 3-4 years, we introduced a new product line that's suitable and good for this type of outdoor application and highly recommended.
Well, that sounds excellent. Brian, why don't you give us an overview of today's presentation?
So today outline is I will be introduce some of the application. I want to help everyone to have an idea of what we're talking about outdoor, an application that we usually see that use power supply as an outdoor, including the whole application. And then after that, I will go over a couple common failures that we see and some environment factor that may cause the power supply to fail. And also, I will go over the two product series that we recommend, like the UHP series or the HEP series for outdoor application.
Well, that sounds great. So what does UHP and HEP stand for?
Basically, UHP, U is we call it like U shape, is 1 U high. Okay, and then H is it's high efficiency, high reliable, and P is can say like potted. But the right term to use is encapsulated, but we use P as potted. Yeah. And H is HE stands for harsh environment, and P is also potted as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, with that, let's dive into those outdoor applications.
Okay, this one is we see them all when we go to a baseball game or a football game or at the plaza. All these are called LED displays, LED sign. That it needs a power supply, a 5 volt or 3.3 volt power supply to power up the LED. Okay, and they are all being installed outdoor. Okay, it depends on where you're at. I mean, if you're like winter time, then it's super cold, and then when you turn on the power supply, and then the moisture water will condense, and then the moisture that may cause the power supply to fail. And also DC fan as well. In the past, customer used power supply with the DC fan for this type of application, and the fan would collect the dust and also causes the power supply to fail. It's just the environment that where the power supply being used, so that's why we kind of get rid of the fan and we introduce a power supply with potting compound to help cool down the component. That is just for the LED displays. They are just purely for LED lighting, power up the LED, and then you can so that there's a scoreboard or some commercial side there.
And that's interesting. I would think that reliability and long lifetime would be an important factor in selecting power supplies for these applications, since maintenance could be pretty difficult and costly.
Correct. Yeah, maintenance is costly for this type of application. Usually, I mean, in the past, like 10 years ago, power supply that the customer can use is with the DC fan, and DC fan, they are not reliable, It's on all the time. As time go on, the fan keeps failing, and then you have to have technician there to change the fan. And so the best way to use this is use a fanless power supply. But fanless it's going to cause component to over temperature, because you get rid of the fan, they won't be able to cool down the component. And that's why we introduced the potting compound heat conductant coating compound to help cool down the component. And the case, the power supply enclosure itself also aluminum, so it also helps to cool down the component.
Yeah, the poor reliability of fans. I think anybody that's had their own personal computer for more than 5 or 10 years has probably had a fan fail.
Yeah, I mean, computer, correct. I mean, fan is depending on how you use it. I mean, computer, those are indoor is pretty good already. I mean, we're dealing with outdoor. When it's like negative 30 degrees C, it's different kind of stuff you have to deal with.
So, what are some other challenging outdoor applications, Brian?
The next one, I am going to introduce the another application called telecommunication. So popular now is the 5G base station. Those base station we call 5G base station is it need a power supply to convert AC to DC to power it up, and the power supply. Sometimes customer would install it next to the base station externally. So if you're using a power supply with opening or not weatherproof, not dustproof, moistureproof, it also cause issue. So that's why this type of application is better to have a power supply that are suited. Okay. And another one is also related telecommunication is the internet access point. It's smaller scale. It's like a small industrial use. That internet access point need 48 volt power supply. It's just like a modem. You can imagine it's just like a modem, and it needs a power supply to power it up. And it's also being installed outdoor. Okay, so it's similar to it. Some customer even like shown in the slide, it's even installed the power supply externally without any shelf at all. So in this case, it's better to have the power supply with fully encapsulated for this type of outdoor application.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to expose the power supply, that you're going to have to protect it from those elements.
Solar energy is another popular application, especially in California. What we call is called solar jacker. So it's basically the solar panel need to be rotate or jacking the sun, okay, so that it can maximize its energy. And what's rotating the solar is a motor. And the motor also need a AC to DC power supply. Similar to telecommunication, the power supply is going to be installed either underneath the solar or inside a box to control the motor. It's also being installed outdoor. Okay. And another one is wind turbine. The power supply usually used to power the controller inside the turbine. Wind turbine is different. Even you can say it's like a harsh environment because it's nearby the sea. Okay, seawater has salt that may get into the power supply and cause the component to corrode. Okay, it's even worse than outdoor, like solar. So it really depends on where you install the power supply for outdoor. Some location is really bad, some are considered acceptable.
Yeah, and boy, we talked about product reliability and lifetime with those outdoor stadium displays, but I would think a repair on a wind turbine at sea would be very, very costly.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get on that thing, it's not easy. Usually, the designers are smart. I mean, they use redundancy, meaning they put two power supply there in case, one defected, the other one will pick up and keep it going. And they would, they when they have time, so they don't they don't have to do it right away. They may schedule maintenance time where once a month they do it all.
That makes sense. So, Brian, we've covered lighting, communications, and now renewable energy sources. So what is another outdoor application for your Meanwell power supplies?
Okay. So the last one, the previous three application is purely outdoor installation, fixed installation. The next one is more like for transportation that involve outdoor and also vibration. Popular one is the EV golf cart. It needs a power supply or a battery charger to charge the battery bank inside the car. Some design, they may put the power supply inside the car and have the AC power cable coming out and plug into the wall outlet to charge the car. And after they fully charge, it unplug and go. So the power supply basically installed inside the car. And when the car is, going around and then hit the pump, then it create what they call vibration to the power supply internal component. So in this case, it's better to use a power supply that is fully encapsulated. Okay, so it can handle the vibration, the shock. You can call it like frequent. Those shock vibration is frequent at its goal. Okay, and then the other one is fixed installation, but called pulse scanner. It's fixed installation, but it's installed it underneath the highway. So there's car that's driving on top of it, and then they hit the pump, and then it also curves the power supply to it also creates shock to the power supply that would cause the internal component to fail as well. So those vibration application, we usually suggest customer to use fully encapsulated power supply.
Your description of all these outdoor applications is just a reminder of how electrical power is moving into everything today. The use of power supplies like this is just expanding exponentially.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays, basically everything needs an AC to DC power supply. I mean, converting AC power to DC power. In the past, we see a lot of low voltage, 24 volt, 48 volt. Now you're moving up to like 100, 380, EV charger now like at 380. So those are going to be like a lot of outdoor application become more and more popular now.
Yeah, exactly right.
I want to point out some common failure that due to the environmental factor. Okay, the first one picture is dust and debris. So I have some, we do some repairs at that facility here. So we see some of this unit return, and when we open up the unit, we say, "Whoa, what is going on?" Like dirt, debris inside. And when we talk to the customer, say, "Oh, we installed them outdoor," and then you see that the DC fan that it suck all the dirt and debris inside. It's causing the insulation to break down. That's why the power supply would malfunction. Okay. And the next one is vibration. So those are the stand-up that we use to secure the PCBA onto the enclosure. And because the customer installed them inside one of the mobile application and hitting the palm or keep moving around and causing the stand-up to break down. Okay. The last one is moisture and condensation. So if you install the power supply outdoor, moisture condensation happen in the morning, and when you turn on the power supply, is causing the insulation to break down, and condensation on power supply, and then it's going to degrade the insulation or increase the resistance between one junction to another junction, and cause the power supply to arc and fail.
For condensation and moisture, what is in that picture that I'm looking at?
Basically, it had the laser of water there, and when the customer power up the power supply, it create arcing and cause the power supply to fail.
Okay, interesting. Now, do you perform your own environmental testing of these power supplies for these environments, or do you work with outside test labs?
We do it internal. We do have a humidity chamber to perform this kind of test, but we specify humidity to be non-condensing. Okay, so condensation is where you have cold and then you have high temp, then it causes water to form, and that's why it's caused to fail.
Okay, thanks. So Brian, now that we've covered some of these outdoor applications and the environmental challenges, can you give us some insights into the different types of power supplies that system designers can choose from to meet these application needs?
Yeah, sure. So meanwhile, we do have two product lines that are highly recommend for outdoor application. It depends on how the application going to install the power supply, whether you're going to install it inside a cabinet or a NEMA box, or whether you want to install the power supply externally, or if you want or the application have vibration. So we have the what we call conduction cool power supply, and also fully encapsulated power supply.
Yeah, now you've kind of showed those a little bit in some of the application images, but why don't you tell us a little more about the conduction cool designs?
Okay. So the conduction cool power supply, we have a product series that we have 200 watt, 350 up to 1500 watt. We have wide power range suitable for LED lighting displays or telecommunication network, and they are fanless. Okay, like I said earlier, the fan usually fail for outdoor, and so we designed the power supply without the fan, and also half encapsulated. Okay, meaning that we add silicon elastomer onto the power supply to help cooling down the component, and the power supply enclosure itself is aluminum based. Okay, it also helps to cool down the component as well. Another feature is the operational temperature. Okay, it can go down to negative 30 degrees C. Okay, wherefore it's really good for it's good enough for outdoor application. Almost top of the line car that we offer with 95% efficiency on this AC to DC power supply. Also, it had all kind of safety regulation approval such as UL, TUV, and also CE as well.
So this is probably an obvious question, but are these types of power supplies typically mounted with the open side facing down so that the moisture and dust have a little harder time getting in?
Installation orientation does not really matter. You can install it vertically or horizontally, just because the design itself silicon elastomer, so it's basically shielded all the component from condensation or moisture already. How we design the UHP series is basically for dust and moisture. So when you use it, you have to install it inside another NEMA box or the LED display. So I have photo on the right hand side, which is before we add potting compound. So you can see the PCBA with some SMD component. The second photo is where we add the potting compound onto it. So the potting compound basically is one type of protective laser on top of the PCB so that moisture and dust won't get into the PCB. That's what we call half encapsulated. And the silicon elastomer is heat thermoconductive, so it helps to cool down some of the component at the bottom of the PCB. So like for example, some controller IC, some SMD component, it's going to help cool it down. For better heat dissipation, customer can also install the power supply onto the heatsink plate. Okay, that is also help to further dissipate all the heat out from the power supply. Customer don't really have to additional plate, aluminum plate for each power supply, but they can install the power supply onto their cabinet or their enclosure. And as long as their enclosure is alloy that thermoconduct, then it's also help to cool down the component as well.
Interesting. Now, so what's the thought process behind encapsulating only halfway?
The thought process is to really force not to for all application, and it's for application where you use it for LED displays that you don't really need to fully encapsulate it, because we have to deal with cost as well. Those thermoconductive silicon elastomer is not low cost. It's pretty costful for the entire power supply cost. So we want to offer to customer what we call best cost performance ratio, meaning if you don't need it, we don't want you to spend too much money to buy a product that you don't really need that function. That's why we only do half encapsulated.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So now that we've talked about the half encapsulated designs, let's discuss the fully enclosed designs.
Yeah, so for the fully encapsulated, we also have 100 watt power rating up to 1000 watt. Okay, it's also fanless. Okay, but it's shielded. Okay, so there's no opening to the enclosure at all. Okay, it's also IP67 design that it passed IP67 testing, and also withstand up to 10G anti-vibration. Okay, meaning if you subject the power supply to vibration test, which it can do up to 10G high frequency. And also operational temperature, this one can operate at colder temperature at negative 55 degrees C. Okay, and efficiency is similar to the UHP. It can do up to 95% efficiency. If you compare the two units, you can see totally different. One is you see opening, the other one is completely sealed. So it's even better for outdoor.
Yeah, that helps me understand why you have the two different product lines. That makes it more clear to me.
Okay. So slide 12 is I try to show give you guys a better view of how we do the encapsulant. So the photo number one is you see all the component similar to the UHP. You see the cap, you see the transformer, and the photo in the middle is after we encapsulate it. So the black color that you see there is the silicon elastomer. Okay, it basically shielded the entire power supply, so no water, no dust can basically get into the unit. And then we also have the top cover onto it to cover the entire unit. That being said, the silicon compound or elastomer going to have two basically functions. One is to help to dissipate the heat into the casing, and help cool down the component. And the other one is also bonding the component onto within the power supply so that it can withstand higher shock or vibration in the application.
Now, seeing that, it's understandable why you offer the one with half encapsulation, because that's a lot of silicon elastomer.
Correct. So, I mean, if you have application like the EV golf cart earlier, heating the power supply, then fully encapsulated power supply is highly recommended. So, because all the components are shielded, they are bonded together, there's no way it loose anymore. Also, application where nearby sea, then they have salt water, it might get into the power supply. So, this type of fully encapsulated power supply is really highly recommended for those.
That makes sense. As we get near the end of today's Tech Chat, can you provide us with a summary, Brian?
In summary, it's for outdoor application, we have to deal with, number one, environment. Okay, we have to deal with condensation, debris, low and high temperature, so can cause the power supply to fail. Okay, that's why we introduced the UHP that rely on the UHP and the HEP series that rely on potting compound or potting elastomer to deal with those condensation debris. Those power supply can also operate down to negative 30 degrees C or 55 degrees C. Okay, that is suitable for outdoor. The second one is vibration. So if your application has vibration, it's going to have vibration, then we would suggest to use the HEP series. Lastly, also those two power supply fanless as well. So there's no concern about the fan going to fail, and also the elastomer also help to cool down the power supply.
Well, thanks, Brian. That was a helpful introduction. I really appreciated getting to see inside the power supplies and see how you use the silicone elastomer, and just get some insights on how you design these things for different applications. And I think our engineers who are looking for power supply options for outdoor applications are going to find this very helpful to make informed decisions.
You're welcome. Anytime you guys have questions, if asked to suggest a power supply for certain application, hit me up. I can suggest a product that's really suitable for application.
Well, that's excellent. Thanks, Brian. So with that, we close today's Tech Chat. A special thanks to our power supply expert, Brian Liu, for today's presentation on power supplies for outdoor applications. If you're looking for more information on Meanwell power supplies, and they have a lot more power supplies than we covered here today, I would like to encourage you to check out their products at Mouser Electronics, our sponsor for today's Tech Chat. And please join us again next time on Tech Chat, where we chat with the leading technical experts like Brian Liu from Meanwell, who are changing our world every day.